Wonderful day, wonderful day, wonderful day indeed. This is your neighborhood Sensei Fouché, and I begin every show by first strongly suggesting, because a lot of folks don't like being told what to do, true indeed. So, in forward conversation, I most emphatically implore for all of you beautiful, wonderful, self loving, worthy individuals to stay woke. But in the process, never ever get all stressed out. You know what I'm saying? Make sure you take all necessary meditative practices and procedures, including environmental change if and when necessary, to relax. And like Sensei Fouché, always be prepared to take those notes. You know what I'm saying? And I had to twist it up on this conversation and actually show you the highlights that I've done in notation in our, topic of conversation, you know what I'm saying, which is this wonderful novel by Lindsay C. Gibson titled Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And of course, I replace parents with people for all of us, regular followers. Because, parents is just a specific label of person, which identifies with, a specific individual or individuals in blood relation. You know what I'm saying? So I had to take a week off. There was outside reconstruction to our home. All of the windows were being replaced on the house, so this room was unavailable as pretty much most rooms in this house. You know what I'm saying? And it took a few days for me to regroup and reorganize in a better specific, different than what I had before. You know what I'm saying? I mean, what I had before was before, and we always dealing with the now. You know what I'm saying? And in the now moment, I wanted to upgrade and elevate, this location. You know what I'm saying? I call it the dojo, because this is my workout room. You know what I'm saying? Mental workout, physical as well. I go through what I call extension exercises, could be loosely referenced to a form of yoga. I have lower back issues. And when I was going through my physical therapy, they taught me these extension exercises, as I call it. And they're extremely helpful in keeping nimbleness, for my specific condition and age. I am making it a more consistent habit to stay in practice of my extension exercises. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, moving forward in conversation, the background is a little different. I know for all of you viewers. For myself, the angle just changed because I rearranged specific dynamics or objects within the room. And being that I did that, it angled my background differently for, all of you viewers. The background that you see now, I would look at this when I'm facing my computer at the time. I have a desktop. I also have a laptop too, but I use the laptop when I'm on the road or on the go. But then I have a tablet as well, and I probably use my tablet way more than the laptop. And my home base in the dojo is the desktop. You know what I'm saying? Heavy artillery loaded up, within the box. You know what I'm saying? As far as storage capacity. Important, very important for me. And I'm not going to go, too long into this opening monologue. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to really go through um, sponsorship shout outs or any of that sort. I'm really excited to be back and be able to drop some information on all of you, because that's what I love to do. You know what I'm saying? I love learning and I love sharing what I learn even more. And in this instance, just kind of reading along and highlighted references, you know, specific, important, um, itemized paragraphs and sentences that relate to a deeper understanding of those outside of us, and even more, mostly ourselves within. You know what I'm saying? Because I would also relate this mostly to myself and how I identify myself, as well as how it relates to other people that I interact with on a minimal or even more daily um, consistency. You know what I'm saying? Information is important, and taking notations is extremely important. And I was poor at taking notations in my childhood, in my school days. You know what I'm saying? I was the type of dude to copy notes off of friends that actually did the work. You know what I'm saying? And just kind of give a quick glance over and try to play smoke and mirrors in the classroom. You know what I'm saying? And I wasn't really a dummy at all. I just wasn't assertive in the learning process. Like, I was real lazy. I prefer to play before work. You know what I'm saying? And it caused a lot of struggle with that mind state in my earliest of um, existing, moving forward, in my younger days. But anyway, again, this wonderful novel that we've been covering is Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. Replace parents with people. For me, you can keep it at parents if you want. I am going to be more itemizing and say people, because, again, your parents are just a specific label of person to you. To everybody else, they're just a random or, some form of necessary relation, connection. And this book is telling us or explaining tools in how to heal from distant, rejecting, or self-involved parents. And we're all personal, and that's our intuitive primary instinct is, to focus on self. But we interrelate with others, or interexist, if I could use that connection. We interexist with others, which means we have to interrelate in some form, within society. So was your parent difficult, immature, or emotionally unavailable? If you grew up with an emotionally immature, unavailable, or selfish parent, you may have lingering feelings of anger. Excuse me. I just burped. Loneliness, betrayal, or abandonment. You may recall your childhood as a time when your emotional needs were not met, when your feelings were dismissed, or when you took on adult levels of responsibility in an effort to compensate for your parents' behavior. These wounds can be healed, and you can move forward in your life. I know I have. And I had a long time struggle in being comfortable and forget about others before having self comfort. Like, that took a lot of work and a lot of reflective truth. You know what I'm saying? I had to be extremely reflective and truthful with myself in order to move forward, begin to move forward, begin to see the path that my footsteps need to go towards in order to move forward with most assertive efficiency. We are in chapter 5. This is part 2 of chapter 5. Took a week off. Necessary. And I apologize, but we here right now. You know what I'm saying? We dealing with the now, right? Chapter 5 is titled, How Different Children React to Emotionally Immature Parenting. And we began in the chapter defining externalizers, and internalizers. And to be synonymous in understanding, anyone that understands the simple terminology introverted and extroverted, it's the same thing. Internalizers and externalizers. And I'm not going to go into looking up a definition. I'm trusting the basic intelligence of my audience to be able to, simplify that definition and distinction. Understanding the externalizer's worldview. Internalizers certainly suffer more consciously, but their tendency to blame themselves has the silver lining of eliciting reassurance and support from others. Eliciting. That's a very interesting word. You know what I'm saying? Let's look that up right quick before we really dig in. Elicit. Elicit is a verb, and it is to evoke or draw out from someone in reaction to one's own actions or questions. It's a premeditated action in order to get a reaction from someone else by using a specific action or reaction, a reaction initially of your choosing. And it's going to be immature, you know what I'm saying, in what we're covering in our novel. So, in contrast, externalizers engage in behaviors that often exasperate and anger others. And exasperate, just in a loose reference of definition, is to entice. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like, try to rouse someone up into an uncontrolled feeling. So when they need help, others typically want to keep their distance. However, externalizers usually keep acting up until somebody steps in to help them. Conversely, internalizers may suffer in silence and continue to look just fine, even as they're breaking down inside. Often people don't offer internalizers assistance because they don't realize that they need it. You know what I'm saying? Externalizers are going to be like, a baby or an infant throwing a fit, acting up, kicking and screaming on the floor, and just, going into some, Damien Omen type of dilemma. For anyone that's into horror films, they would understand, the Omen, you know, series or movie. You know what I'm saying? With internalizers, they're going to hold it in. And you're really not going to be sure whether, they're okay or not okay. They're going to tell you they're okay. And you're going to get a sense that they're probably not okay, but they're going to be very persistent in their insistence to tell you that nothing is wrong. Still, it's important for internalizers to understand the worldview of externalizers in order to deal with them more effectively. Like, learn your opposite. You know what I'm saying? Especially because most emotionally immature parents are externalizers and struggle against reality rather than coping with it. They blame the outside world for their problems as if reality were at fault. If you think this sounds like the behavior of a young child, you're exactly right. Externalizing keeps people from growing psychologically and is therefore associated with emotional immaturity. Internalizing, on the other hand, promotes psychological development through the use of self-reflection. Externalizing tends to elicit punishment and rejection. In contrast to well-behaved internalizers, externalizers act out their anxiety, pain, or depression. Again, like a little kid or infant, throwing a fit. They do impulsive things to distract themselves from their immediate problems. You know what I'm saying? And it's basically like attention seekers, so that way it just kind of deflects, or in their mind, it's supposed to eliminate, the problem, by using, someone for emotional sympathy. You know what I'm saying? They feel like the problem is shuttered and gone. You know what I'm saying? And someone else is gonna coddle them, through that discomfort of feeling. So again, externalizing tends to elicit punishment and rejection. In contrast to well-behaved internalizers, externalizers act out their anxiety, pain, or depression. They do impulsive things to distract themselves from their immediate problems. Although this may help them feel better temporarily, it creates more problems down the road. It creates more problems down the road, man. You know what I'm saying? If you don't deal with the situation and be mature in the process of going through, whatever the situation may be, doesn't matter whether you like it or not. It has to happen, and you have to be in complete understanding and aware of whatever's being identified. You know what I'm saying? Because it ain't gonna go away. It ain't gonna go away, pardon me. You know what I'm saying? So again, it creates more problems down the road. It's like, you got a problem, or the old analogy is, you sweep these problems under the rug like dust, and you think that the house is clean, or so it appears to be clean. But you lift up that rug and there's a whole bunch of dirt under it. If there's enough dirt underneath that rug, it's gonna leak back out and show itself. It never went away. It was always there. You tried to cover it up, but the place is still dirty. You just covered it and disguised as if, there was no mess, and there is a mess. And you put enough dirt under there and it's going to leak out. You know what I'm saying? And that's, the comparison. When externalizers have to face the consequences of their impulsivity, they're vulnerable to strong but brief feelings of shame and failure. Just brief, you know what I'm saying? because they're externalizers. So they're gonna do something in order to get massaged by someone else's sympathy. However, they usually use denial to avoid shame, rather than wondering whether or how they might need to change. You know what I'm saying? They don't think about change. They just think about someone coddling them and um, entitling them for their immature behavior. Like it's okay. It's okay to be a baby. You know what I'm saying? And you grown or, claim mature. But the reality is alternate. This lands them in a vicious cycle of impulsivity, followed by feelings of failure that prompt still more impulsivity. As a result, externalizers repeatedly feel brief bursts of low self worth and a sense of being bad. Oh, um, nobody likes me. Always something wrong. There's nothing good about me. I suck. That's the statements. And it's basically just trying to use your sympathy so that way they're enabled in their immature behavior. Again, to avoid total self-hatred, they rid themselves of shame by blaming others and making excuses. It's never their fault. It's always somebody else's fault. You know what I'm saying? I hear this with the POTUS here in the United States of America right now. I've never heard this dude say anything was his fault. He says that things are great because of him, but not that something, not right he could have did better at. You know what I'm saying? That dude takes no accountability. But, that's for a different conversation and topic. And we are not speaking about that specific person who I choose not to name, but he is the current POTUS of the United States, number 45 and 47 to be most specific. So really think about that. This strategy doesn't win them much sympathy, except among fellow externalizers. Fellow immature people are the only ones that will accept this behavior. Why? Because they expect for you to accept the same behavior from them, and y'all just run like a pack. A pack of suckers. A pack of let's not try to disrespect anybody by using those type of words, but just a pack of emotionally weaker individuals. You know what I'm saying? They're not as emotionally secure. You know what I'm saying? And you put a pack of them together and they all feel comfortable within their own misery. So again, this strategy doesn't win them much sympathy, except among fellow externalizers. So they often end up without the emotional support they were seeking. You know what I'm saying? They're not getting grown love, grown attention, grown information. You know what I'm saying? A firm conversation on the experience and how to deal with it. You know what I'm saying? They just want to run around in a playpen with a bunch of other babies. You know what I'm saying? And they're never going to be helped. And they'll say they want help, but they really don't want help. They just want to roll around in a playpen with a bunch of other babies. Externalizers don't get a chance to grow or learn from mistakes because they expel stress as soon as it hits. They don't know how to deal with it, so they go into this rage and fit. Believing their problems need to be solved by someone else, they look to others to make them feel better. You know what I'm saying? They'll go to someone else and pour their misery completely into that other person and not have any solutions of their own. They'll expect for you to solve their problems for them. And if you choose to give those type of people any kind of, resolution, they're probably going to reject it. You know what I'm saying? Because they want you to coddle them, not truly help them be able to grow. You know what I'm saying? They prefer to be babies. So again, believing their problems need to be solved by someone else, they look to others to make them feel better, sometimes with a hint of resentment about not being helped sooner. I tell you, I don't read ahead. I'm just reading along for you guys. You know what I'm saying? And then I ad lib, lift my head up, and I'm ad libbing. I ain't even see what was coming next. You might picture them as always looking for an external power source to plug into, while internalizers have their batteries included. Of course, sometimes internalizers need a recharge, but they don't routinely make their problem someone else's issue. You know what I'm saying? And that's me. I'll share a personal story. I was going through a homeless situation for maybe a couple of years, if that, kind of off and on, for my 13 years in Atlanta completely. You know what I'm saying? But, you know, I would blow my money. You know what I'm saying? Having addiction issues. And in that process, I would not have money to pay my rent where I was staying. And in a lot of cases, like, I had to move out. Like, I lived basically by the backpack and suitcase because, I wasn't too sure on if I was going to be at a place for long term because, I could have a reaction in an episode and go through what they would call a binge. You know what I'm saying? And go on an addiction binge. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, in that process, like, yeah, I just was stuck in place. You know what I'm saying? And I didn't tell anybody, what was going on. Like, they would just kind of, casually ask or passively ask, and I would, kind of brush it off or, just kind of give them a very short answer and just kind of distract away from, that specific topic and conversation because I didn't want to be exposed, and I did it in an internalizing fashion, but anyway, let's move forward. Left unchecked, an early externalizing coping style results in emotional immaturity. Most emotionally immature parents have, or let me, most emotionally immature people have an externalizing coping style because they're always looking outside themselves to feel better. Externalizers don't work to develop their self control, they prefer to be out of control. They get overwhelmed by emotion and either deny the seriousness of the problems or blame other people. Externalizers think reality should conform to their wishes. You know what I'm saying? The world is supposed to change to what they want as opposed to them adapting to the world. The world is bigger than an individual person as opposed to an individual person being bigger than the whole world. It doesn't work like that. You know what I'm saying? Simple science and physics will tell you that. You know what I'm saying? So, again, externalizers think reality should conform to their wishes, whereas most mature people deal with reality and adapt to it. Adapt or die. Externalizing in children promotes emotional dependency and enmeshment with the parents' dynamics. Further, emotionally immature parents may indulge an externalizing child because doing so distracts them from their own unresolved issues. You know what I'm saying? That's where you have again, immature people being primary guardians of immature adolescents. You know what I'm saying? And the math is going to tell me that the probability of them, being more properly mature in their aging process, amongst peers is going to be, as far as high level failure. You know what I'm saying? Because there's a high level of or a great amount of immature people in general in this world, and they're teaching younger ones that'll be the next generation of immature leaders. When dealing with an out of control child, parents don't have time to think about their own pain from the past. Instead, they can take on the role of the strong parent, helping a weak and dependent child who couldn't get along without them. Although externalizing children often struggle with behavioral problems, impulsivity, emotional volatility, and even addictions, these ways of acting out have the advantage of making their distress visible. Their pain doesn't stay unseen, as it does with internalizers, though it may be misinterpreted as defiance, opposition, or senseless troublemaking. And that's just gaslighting or minimizing. You know what I'm saying? To use those words. Externalizing exists along a continuum of severity. At the extreme end are predatory, sociopathic people who see others as resources to exploit with no regard for their rights or feelings. They're selfish. They don't care about, the residual damage of them extending their emotional support and the fact of that you lack authenticity in what you're trying to gain from them. You know what I'm saying? And that's a toxic person. Milder or quieter externalizers can look like internalizers because they're so non-confrontational, but they can be identified by their belief that others should change. When they start pointing the finger in the other direction, then you already know that they're more of an externalizer than an internalizer. Internalizers are going to say, they're going to beat themselves to death about how much they're at fault. And they're the reason why, others don't like them, you know what I'm saying? Or don't connect or relate to them. You know what I'm saying? These externalizers, it's going to be the other person's fault. And they're going to exasperate that to the greatest of degree. Mild externalizers can show up in many forms. As mentioned, on the surface, they may even seem to be internalizers. The key is whether they blame others for their unhappiness. Many who are internalizers have lived with out of control externalizing siblings. A predatory, indulged sibling, whether older or younger, made life miserable. You know what I'm saying? And it could be like, a cousin, someone in close family relation that you're always around. You know what I'm saying? That basically you grew up with. So again, a predatory, or let me go back. Many who are internalizers have lived with out of control externalizing siblings. A predatory, indulged sibling, whether older or younger, made life miserable for them as children while their parents did nothing to intervene. Their parents often saw the externalizing siblings as special in some way and let them get away with all kinds of bad behavior. You know what I'm saying? In some cases, this even took the form of sexual abuse. Externalizing siblings can also perpetrate emotional abuse, ruling the family with their troubles and tantrums. While the internalizers felt like they couldn't get away with anything, their externalizing siblings were let off the hook repeatedly. Emotionally immature parents often placate or rescue externalizing children, just excusing their behaviors. Oh, they're just kids. It don't even matter how old they are. Oh, they'll find some different form of an excuse, even when they're an adult. Well, he's just my baby, whatever. Often, this seems like the only solution because the externalizers keep making impulsive choices that make their lives unmanageable. In a family with an externalizing sibling, the parent's attitude is to silence any complaints of unfairness by the internalizer, telling the child to try to get along or to understand the sibling's problem instead of dealing with the unruly, disrespectful child. You'll tell the other child, like, well, you just have to find a way to get along with them. It's more your fault of why you're not able to get along. That they are like this, and then they'll gaslight it and you know um, massage the situation like they're not an unruly and troublesome person. They'll excuse it and find excuses for their behavior instead of try to deal with it and actually um, assertively um, confront in conversation, the guilty party, the true guilty party. For the parent, nothing is worth getting a kid who externalizes upset. The message to internalizers is that they should put their needs on the back burner and instead focus on what the externalizer needs. Externalizers are also prone to wrongly accusing others of abuse, presenting themselves as the wronged victim who needs special attention. Internalizing and externalizing occur on a spectrum, with the most severe examples of each differing profoundly from one another. Under the right conditions, each type can display behaviors and attitudes ordinarily associated with the other type. For instance, one externalizers hit rock bottom, they sometimes open up to the idea that they may need to change instead of expecting the world to adjust to them. And when under severe stress, some internalizers start reacting as impulsively as an externalizer. And I call that, for my own analogy and reference, the volcano. You let the lava build up, build up, build up until it spikes at the peak and then just explodes and overflows. Internalizers can slip into externalizing when they get overly stressed or lonely. Let me go back. Because I skipped something. Externalizing and internalizing are just two sides of being human. Everyone can show more or less of either style depending on circumstances and where they fall on the continuum. That said, people who seek therapy or enjoy reading about self help are far more likely to have an internalizing style of coping. They are always trying to figure out what they can do to change their lives for the better. In contrast, people who externalize their problems are more likely to end up in treatment due to external pressures such as courts, martial ultimatums, or rehab. Like, you gotta hit darn near rock bottom. Much of addiction recovery is geared towards nudging externalizers toward adopting a more internalizing coping style and taking responsibility for themselves. You could even think of groups like AA as a movement designed to turn externalizers into internalizers who become accountable for their own change. Now, I'm going to read where I made my mistake in starting before. I skipped a paragraph or a couple of paragraphs. Internalizers can slip into externalizing when they get overly stressed or lonely. Sometimes overly self sacrificing internalizers start acting out their distress through affairs or superficial sexual liaisons. They often feel tremendous shame and guilt about this and are terrified that they'll be found out. Yet, they're attracted to these liaisons as an escape from an emotionally or sexually barren life. And let me um hold point right there and kind of ad lib in, because for me, I could definitely associate with this. So it says again, internalizers can slip into externalizing when they get overly stressed or lonely, and that was me, line for line. Sometimes overly self-sacrificing internalizers start acting out their distress through affairs and superficial sexual liaisons. Whenever I felt so distressed because something triggered me, then I would go into these binge cycles and go through these secret liaisons and affairs, you know what I'm saying? And I felt extreme shame and guilt, not only during the process of it, but when I'm going through the addiction, like I'm less thinking about that. But on the back end, I know that when the high all comes down, like that big guilty sign is going to get a lot heavier. You know what I'm saying? And I know it's there and I do, have it inside. But the addiction, going through the using, of the specific type of addiction, it's gonna, temporarily shade, whatever troubles you're trying to run from. But, you can't hide from them because eventually the high comes down and you have to deal with the reality. One way or the other. Having an affair helps them feel alive and special again and offers the possibility of getting their needs for attention met outside of their primary relationship without rocking the boat. And me, I can't live that life no more. You know what I'm saying? Because it's too much at risk and it's not really worth it. You know what I'm saying? There's just too many bigger problems that come out of that type of handling of these situations. Most of the time, they first try to talk to their partner about their unhappiness, right? Since their instinct is to take responsibility for solving problems. But if their partner doesn't listen or worse, rebuffs these overtures, internalizers may go on the lookout for someone to save them. I'm telling you, man, I lived this. I lived it. And that's why I tell all of you. You know what I'm saying? I don't tell nobody something that I don't know. If I don't know, I am going to deeply learn about it. But trust me, I definitely know about this. So, yeah, again, but if their partner doesn't listen or worse, rebuffs these overtures, internalizers may go on the lookout for someone to save them. A classic externalizer approach. Maybe this helps explain many midlife crises wherein previously responsible people seem to reverse some of their values in surprising ways. And it, to me, is just dormancy. Like this immaturity has always been in you, you know what I'm saying? And then it just took this extreme situation in order for it to expose itself. They seem to suddenly reject obligations and responsibilities as they seek a more personally rewarding life. But in light of the typical internalizer profile, perhaps the midlife metamorphosis isn't so sudden or surprising after all. Maybe it's a result of years of self-denial. I just said that. I'm more proud of myself. I didn't know that was coming, but it made sense. That's how deeply I have studied this. And even more was this before I educated myself into processing past this type of mind state. Because I wanted to reflect in a mature shine as opposed to, a loosely dull, immature facing. I was trying to catch where I was at. They seem maybe, all right, yeah. They seem to suddenly reject obligations and responsibilities as they seek a more personally rewarding life. But in light of the typical internalizer profile, perhaps the midlife metamorphosis isn't so sudden or surprising after all. Maybe it's a result of years of self denial, followed by the internalizer's realization that other people's needs have to come first way too many times. Man, I'd be so excited I lose my place. You know what I'm saying? And we're at the end of the chapter. So let's finish this up. People who fall at the extremes of either coping style usually have significant problems in living. Extreme externalizers tend to develop physical symptoms or get in trouble with their behavior, while extreme internalizers are prone to emotional symptoms like anxiety or depression. You can see that internalizers could develop self-defeating tendencies towards inaction, not speaking up, and avoid asking for help. Conversely, although externalizers may find their life a mess, their impulsive style often makes them more willing to take action and try different solutions. Sometimes that kind of impetuousness is exactly what's needed. So, in some situations, it can be a strength. Under the right conditions, each style might be useful. Ultimately, problems tend to arise when people get stuck at the extreme of either coping style. Still, the overall externalizer profile does reflect a personality that's generally more unrealistic and less adaptive. This is because the extreme externalizer's immature coping mechanisms simply don't work well for successful relationships, nor do they promote mature psychological development. Children have different ways of reacting to emotionally immature parenting, but they all develop subconscious healing fantasies or role selves, character selves, about how things could get better. If a child's true self isn't accepted, the child will also adopt a role self as a way of having a valuable part to play in the family. Wow. I can't believe I hit that one again. In addition, children develop two main coping styles in response to emotionally immature parenting. Again, externalizing or internalizing. So then they're going to cycle. You know what I'm saying? They're going to cycle forward, or not forward, but, cycle in continuance of being problem based, you know what I'm saying? Because they were taught or led by immature people. Externalizers think the solutions to their problems will come from outside themselves, while internalizers tend to look within themselves to solve problems. Either style might be advantageous in the moment, but internalizing is far less likely to create conflict or subject other people to hardship. Instead, the internalizer's difficulties are much more likely to result in inner distress, the volcano, creating the volcano, as I call it. That's what's going to happen. That's what you're doing once you're in that process, of being or existing. You know what I'm saying? Because I define being as one, being past that. You know what I'm saying? Anything below that, I reference as existing. But, I want to thank all of you audience members for bearing with me and going through this conversation together. And, for me, sharing some of my relatable experiences to aid along in my ad libs to explain, the information, and to assure how I relate to this information. You know what I'm saying? I always tell myself in these days, I should go back to school and actually get a doctorate. You know what I'm saying? Because I know a lot of people respect the paperwork. Most or more than the actual application of deep learning that you put into it. You know what I'm saying? Because I know I could go toe to toe with a lot of general or intermediate psychologists in a conversation on, self-worth. You know what I'm saying? That's how deep I've educated myself. And this first started because I needed to figure out, what broke me, a long time ago. And then as anyone who follows, and I don't mention much, but, I have a daughter and she's going through, her process. And through her going through her process, like I started having flashbacks. And I was like, yo, I gotta, re-educate myself even deeper beyond myself. You know what I'm saying? And just use myself as, a high level reference, in personal connection into what I should know through study. You know what I'm saying? Because I experienced it before I understood it through deeper study to define it in its completeness. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, let me just move forward and let you guys also, or individuals more so, I don't want to get gender specific, but all of you individuals to move forward within the rest of your day or evening, wherever you may be. So let me end it by stating, you know what I'm saying? This is your neighborhood Sensei Fouché, and I always first strongly suggest, because a lot of folks don't like being told what to do, true indeed. So moving forward in conversation, I most and more emphatically implore for all of you beautiful, wonderful, self-loving, worthy individuals, don't let them put you to sleep or convince you that you need to go to sleep. You know what I'm saying? Stay woke. And in the process, you know what I'm saying? I'm just excited because, I get real energetic, when it comes to sharing, you know what I'm saying, this speech, with all of you. You know what I'm saying? But in the process, don't never get all stressed out. You know what I'm saying? Make sure you take all necessary meditative practices and procedures, including environmental change if and when necessary, to relax. And like Sensei Fouché, and we about to go into the next chapter, but I'm going to show you because, I always end it. Because Fouché, Mr. Sensei, always itemizes taking those notes. Be smooth in unity. One.